Imagine if one of the richest men in the world walked into a restaurant, dressed like an ordinary customer. Would people recognize him, or would they treat him like just another guy? Today's story is about Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, and how one small mistake by a cashier turned into an unforgettable lesson. Jeff Bezos walked into a busy restaurant one warm afternoon. From the outside, the place looked ordinary: bright lights, the sound of plates clattering, and the steady hum of conversations filling the air. Inside, families laughed over shared meals, friends argued about what to order, and workers on their lunch break hurried to grab something quick before heading back to the office. Jeff slipped into the line like any other customer. He wasn't wearing one of his expensive suits, no polished shoes, no expensive watch glinting on his wrist. Instead, he wore a plain shirt, a pair of jeans, and simple sneakers. He carried no sign of wealth, no sign that he was one of the richest men alive. To the people around him, he was just another face in the crowd. A middle-aged man, bald with glasses, standing quietly and patiently. Nobody turned their head. Nobody whispered his name. Most people were too distracted, scrolling endlessly on their phones, snapping selfies, or chatting with friends about weekend plans. The workers behind the counter were busy too, rushing back and forth, shouting orders to the kitchen, trying to keep up with the never-ending stream of hungry customers. And that was exactly how Jeff liked it. Despite his unimaginable fortune, despite owning one of the most powerful companies in the world, there were still moments when Jeff wanted to step away from the spotlight. He had shaken hands with presidents, walked red carpets, and spoken on stages to thousands of people. But deep down, sometimes, all he wanted was something simple: to eat a meal in peace, without flashing cameras or endless questions. So here he was, just another man in line at a restaurant, waiting patiently for his turn. As he shuffled forward, he looked around. A little boy tugged on his mother's arm, pointing at the menu. Two teenagers argued about who was paying. An older couple sat in the corner, laughing over a shared milkshake. Life, in all its ordinary beauty, surrounded him. And Jeff, for a moment, wasn't the billionaire founder of Amazon. He was simply Jeff, a man craving a burger, fries, and a drink. When he reached the counter, he glanced at the menu, even though he already knew what he wanted. He enjoyed the feeling of standing there, studying the choices, just like everyone else. He spoke politely when his turn came, ordering a simple meal with a smile. To him, it was refreshing. No assistance, no VIP treatment, no private chefs preparing exotic dishes. Just a normal order at a normal restaurant, served by a worker who had no idea who he was. Jeff didn't mind being invisible here. In fact, he found it comforting. For once, nobody expected anything from him. Nobody saw billions of dollars or space rockets or headlines about Amazon. They only saw a man in jeans, quietly waiting for his food. And maybe that was worth more to Jeff than all the attention in the world. When Jeff finally reached the counter, he gave the cashier a warm smile and placed his order. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy, just a burger, fries, and a drink. To Jeff, it was more than enough. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He wasn't there to prove anything. He simply wanted a quick, simple meal like everybody else. But the young cashier on the other side of the counter didn't see it that way. He glanced at Jeff, his eyes scanning him from head to toe. Plain shirt, faded jeans, no luxury watch, no designer shoes, no sign of wealth. The cashier's lips curled into a smirk, and then, without hesitation, he let out a laugh. Really? He scoffed loudly, just enough for people nearby to hear. That's all you're getting? A basic burger and fries. Jeff raised an eyebrow slightly, but didn't say anything. The cashier leaned forward on the counter, still grinning. You look like someone who can barely afford more than that. What's the matter? Couldn't scrape together enough money for a bigger meal? The words cut through the restaurant like a knife. A couple of customers in line turned their heads, eyebrows raised. Others glanced up from their tables, wondering what the noise was about. The room didn't go completely silent, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. People knew what they had just witnessed: a cashier openly mocking a customer. The young man kept going, shaking his head with exaggerated disbelief. Man, you look like you just came in from a thrift store. Did you forget your wallet at home? Or are you just broke? Some customers let out nervous chuckles, not because they thought it was funny, but because they didn't know how else to react. Others frowned, visibly uncomfortable with the rudeness. A mother sitting with her kids whispered, "That's so disrespectful," while an older man in line muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." But through it all, Jeff remained calm. He didn't frown. He didn't snap back. He didn't raise his voice or argue. Instead, he just stood there, his posture relaxed, his face composed, and his eyes soft but steady. He handed over the money for his order, took his receipt, and waited quietly, as if nothing had happened. That silence, that patience, carried more weight than any angry words could. To the people watching, it was almost confusing. Why wasn't he defending himself? Why wasn't he saying something back to the cashier who was mocking him so openly? And that was when the awkwardness grew heavier. It wasn't just about the insult anymore. It was about how Jeff handled it. His quiet dignity made the cashier's laughter seem louder, sharper, and even more out of place. Everyone in that restaurant felt the same uncomfortable question hanging in the air. Why would someone insult a customer like that? They didn't know yet that the man being mocked was Jeff Bezos himself, the billionaire founder of Amazon. But they did know one thing. Something about this moment didn't feel right. Jeff carried his tray carefully to a corner table. On it sat nothing more than a burger, a side of fries, and a soda cup filled to the brim with ice. To him, it was perfect. He had exactly what he came for, something simple. He sat down quietly, unbothered by the earlier insults, and began unwrapping his food as though nothing unusual had happened. But the restaurant itself was no longer calm. At a table not too far away, a couple leaned toward each other, whispering. The woman narrowed her eyes, studying Jeff's face closely. "Wait," she said softly. "Doesn't that guy look familiar?" Her boyfriend looked up from his phone, curious. "Yeah, now that you say it, he does. Hold on, isn't that Jeff Bezos?" The woman's eyes widened. "It is. I'm pretty sure it is." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was just enough to spark curiosity at the next table over. A group of college students, hearing the name, immediately pulled out their phones. They typed quickly into Google, scrolling through images. Their heads snapped up, then back to their screens. The resemblance was undeniable. "Yo," one of them whispered excitedly to his friend. "That's him. That's literally Jeff Bezos." The chatter began to spread like wildfire. One person told another, and within minutes, the restaurant buzzed with energy. Customers looked up from their meals, phones tilted in their hands as they compared pictures online with the man now quietly eating in front of them. Some tried to be discreet, others blatantly pointed. And the more people realized who he was, the louder the whispers grew. "That's the Amazon guy. No way, what's he doing here? Why would Jeff Bezos eat here, of all places?" A few brave customers even pulled out their cameras, snapping pictures and recording videos, careful not to get too close. It wasn't every day you found yourself sharing a restaurant with one of the richest men in the world. Meanwhile, the cashier, who had been the loudest voice in the room just moments ago, remained completely unaware. He was humming to himself, wiping down the counter with a rag, acting as if his earlier mockery had been nothing more than a harmless joke. To him, the customer in jeans was nobody important. That illusion shattered in an instant. One of his coworkers, eyes wide with shock, rushed over to him. She leaned in close and whispered urgently, "Do you know who that is? The guy you laughed at? That's Jeff Bezos." The cashier froze. The rag in his hand slipped, dropping onto the counter. His smile vanished, replaced by confusion. He blinked rapidly, glancing over at the man eating his fries in the corner. "Wait, what? No, you're kidding, right?" The coworker shook her head furiously. "I'm serious. Look around you. Everyone knows. That's him. You just insulted Jeff Bezos." The cashier's stomach dropped. His throat went dry. He looked around at the crowd, at the phones raised in the air, at the customers whispering and staring, and suddenly he realized the truth. The man he had laughed at, mocked, and belittled wasn't just any customer. He was the Jeff Bezos, the billionaire founder of Amazon, one of the most powerful and wealthy people alive. and the cashier had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The cashier froze where he stood. His hands, once busy with a rag, now trembled slightly. His face turned pale as the reality of the situation sank in. Moments earlier, he had been laughing loudly, mocking a man he thought was just another broke customer. But now he realized that the man sitting calmly at the corner table wasn't just anyone. He was Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, a billionaire whose name was recognized in every corner of the world. Suddenly, the laughter disappeared from the cashier's lips, replaced by a heavy silence. Panic spread across his face. His once confident smirk had melted away, leaving behind wide eyes and a nervous twitch in his jaw. He glanced at Jeff again, hoping somehow it wasn't true, hoping maybe it was a mistake. But no, there was no denying it. The man quietly eating a burger and fries was indeed Jeff Bezos. Jeff, on the other hand, remained completely composed. He didn't scowl. He didn't frown. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention. Instead, he chewed his food slowly, calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. That calmness only made the cashier's panic worse. The silence in the restaurant became suffocating. Customers stared openly now, some shaking their heads in disappointment. Parents whispered to their kids about respect. Others muttered under their breath, condemning the cashier's behavior. A few had their phones out, recording the entire scene. This moment was already turning into a viral story. The cashier's throat tightened. He wished desperately that he could take his words back, erase the laughter, rewind the last few minutes of his life. But it was too late. The damage was done, and everyone in the restaurant had seen it. With hesitant steps, he finally gathered the courage to approach Jeff's table. His palms were sweaty, his voice shaky, but he knew he had no choice. Standing there, he cleared his throat softly. "Sir," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry." Jeff slowly looked up, his expression gentle yet unreadable. The cashier swallowed hard, his words tumbling out nervously. "I didn't realize who you were. I shouldn't have said what I did. It was wrong of me to laugh at you like that. Please forgive me." Around the room, everyone watched closely, eager to see how Jeff would respond. Some expected anger. Some thought he might lash out, demand the manager, or even call for the cashier's job. After all, who would dare insult a billionaire? But Jeff didn't do any of those things. He simply looked at the cashier for a moment, then placed his burger down gently on the tray. His eyes were calm, his voice steady, but the words he spoke carried more weight than any outburst ever could. Jeff looked up from his tray, his calm eyes meeting the cashier's nervous, trembling gaze. For a brief moment, the room felt frozen in time. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what he would say. Would he lash out? Would he call the manager? Would he demand justice for the humiliation he had just endured? But instead of anger, Jeff's lips curved into a gentle smile. His voice was soft, steady, and filled with a kindness that no one expected. "Respect," Jeff began, pausing just long enough for the words to sink in, "doesn't cost anything. You should give it to everyone, whether they're rich or poor." The words hit harder than any lecture, sharper than any punishment. They weren't spoken with rage, but with wisdom. And somehow, that made them echo even louder in the cashier's heart. Jeff didn't raise his voice. He didn't embarrass the young man further. He didn't boast about his wealth, his company, or his achievements. Instead, he gave him a lesson that would outlast money, a truth so simple yet so often forgotten. The cashier's face flushed red. He nodded quickly, eyes cast downward, ashamed of his earlier behavior. But along with that shame came a strange relief, gratitude, even. Because in that moment, he realized he had been given something rare, a chance to learn, to grow, and to become better. The restaurant was silent. No one whispered now. No one chuckled or pointed. Instead, every single person in the room sat quietly, reflecting on what they had just seen. Parents leaned closer to their children, whispering words like, "That's what respect means." A teenager put his phone down, shaken by how powerful the moment felt. Even the people who had been recording lowered their cameras, realizing that this wasn't just a spectacle. It was a lesson worth remembering. Jeff returned to his meal as though nothing had happened. Bite by bite, he finished his burger, dipped his fries, and sipped his drink. He didn't act like the richest man in the room. He didn't need to. His humility spoke louder than any status symbol ever could. When he finally stood, Jeff reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. He placed them neatly on the table, leaving a generous tip, far more than the cost of the meal itself. He didn't announce it. He didn't seek applause. He simply left it behind as a quiet gesture of kindness. Then, without a single word more, Jeff Bezos walked calmly out of the restaurant. The door closed behind him, but the weight of his presence lingered long after he was gone. The customers sat in awe, realizing they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not just the presence of one of the wealthiest men alive, but a powerful reminder of what true wealth looks like. It wasn't money. It wasn't fame. It was humility, patience, and above all, respect. And that was the lesson the cashier and everyone else in that restaurant would carry for the rest of their lives. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful story like this one.